Hi, in this video we are going to see some of the web method interview questions. Mainly we are going to see from the developer point of view. The question number 1, can you please explain the difference between the insert notification versus basic notification? So mainly the notification is whenever there is a change in a database, I wanted to publish some document and I wanted to subscribe it from there. So mainly this insert notification document, what will happen? Both the notification, the first step is same. For example, whenever there is a change in the database, it will publish the notification document. So mainly if there is an insert is happening and we have an insert notification, then we will have a communication or the message which is coming as a publishable document which we can subscribe and process it. And what is the difference between both? Mainly the insert notification, when we create an insert notification for the particular table, it will create the required buffer table, triggers and sequence. But in other case, basic notification, if already someone from the DBA or database team already created the buffer table or trigger and sequence, then I wanted to process that records from that particular buffer table. Then we will go with the basic notification. In some cases, the database whoever is managing, so they don't want us to create, they don't want web methods to create the buffer table or trigger or sequence. They wanted to control it, so they can create it and they can give access. Based on that, we can connect to the table, buffer table, which we can pick up the message in order to process the data in a real time. I'll move on to the next question. What are the transaction types in JDBC adapter? So this question, it's mainly it will come most of the interviews, because we will have many adapters in web method, but the mostly used adapter is JDBC adapter. So in that adapter, when we create a connection, we have 3 types of connection. So here the question is, what are the different transaction type in JDBC adapter? So one is node transaction and another one is local transaction, XA transaction. What is node transaction? So for example, the JDBC connection itself, when we configure it, if we specify node transaction, it will take care of the transaction management. For example, if you are trying to insert a record into the table, then whatever required in order to start the transaction, and after the insert it wants to commit the transaction or complete the transaction, or in case of failure roll back the transaction, right? Then those kind of transaction management, it happens automatically. But what is in local transaction? It's a controlled one. For example, you wanted to insert few things and then you wanted to continue some processing, and after that you wanted to commit it. So you wanted to take a control of that particular transaction. Then you can use this local transaction. In this one, we will use a service called start transaction, commit transaction and rollback transaction. All those kind of things the developer manually has to put in the code in order to manage the transaction. What is XA transaction? So XA transaction we mainly use when we have more than one database. For example, I wanted to interact with multiple database. Then if I wanted to handle the transaction management across multiple database or multiple resources, then I will be using a XA transaction. So there will be a coordinating transaction manager which will get involved here, which will have the detail about the status about what is happening for your transaction across database. So once everything is done, it completes or commit the transaction in both the tables. I'll move on to the next one. What are the different ways to invoke the service? So for example, when you create a service in web method, there are many ways to invoke. So for example, you have created a service, you can go to your designer and you can using an invoke step, you can call that service. Or if you have a transformer in a map step, then in the map step you can call any services. For example, if you have a service available in a different web method integration server, then you can use a pub remote invoke in order to call the service. And if you are going to call it from a Java service, then in Java service you can use a do invoke function, using which you can call any services. Similarly, if you have exposed your services as a web service, then you can call that services. And if you wanted to invoke through HTTP, then there is a way you can give a complete namespace of that particular service, which you can use it to call from your using a different protocol. And also there are other ways where when you use a publish and subscribe mechanism, whenever there is a data coming to your trigger, you can invoke your flow service. And if you are using a BPM, then there is a way to call your services through web services. And you have a service which you wanted to schedule it, then you're using scheduler, you can invoke a service. And if you have file polling port, then if there are any messages coming to the particular folder, then you will be able to call your services from that particular configuration. And also you can configure your service in the startup and shutdown services, and whenever there is a server startup or server shutdown, in that particular scenario you wanted to invoke a service, then you can invoke through that particular way. So these are the different ways to invoke our services. I'll move on to the next one, how to invoke a service from a browser. So for example, any web method services, you will be able to invoke it from the browser. So how do we call it? So you have to have a web method host name, port name, and it will be under the invoke directives. So you have to put a invoke, and then you have to give a main folder name, subfolder, and whatever the folder level you have to give that, and then finally you have to put a slash and you have to give a service name. This way you can invoke your any of your services from the web-based URL, and also you can invoke it from your browser. Move on to the next one. When you create and save a flow, for example, I am saving my flow service, which is called my flow, into the folder called my pack, and then my flow is a flow name. Then inside the my pack package, so where you can see the code. So normally any flow services, it will get stored in a flow.xml. So where it gets stored, it's stored under the ns folder of your package, and under the ns you will have a folder and all subfolder, and also your flow name, right? The flow service name also will be like a folder, and once you open the folder you will have a flow.xml. So this is the file your entire code will get stored. I'll move on to the next one. What is drop variable? So when you set the modifier, you will be able to link it and drop it, and you can do other stuff as well in your pipeline. So in this drop variable pipeline is an explicit cleanup. For example, in your code, if you wanted to clean up some variable, then what you can do is you can select and you can drop that variable. And also when it will get dropped during the runtime. For example, you are running a service, or your service is receiving a request, and as part of the request you have completed particular job, and then you wanted to drop some variable. So when you drop it, it will get removed from your memory. So, or it will get removed from available list of variables. For example, I have 10 variables, and I think like I don't need another 5 variables after this particular flow step. Then I can drop it. So only the remaining 5 variables for the upcoming flow steps. I'll move on to the next one. What is the difference between implicit mapping and explicit mapping? So implicit map is in the designer. If you have your pipeline input and also service input, it's having a same name. The variables are having a same name. It will get automatically mapped. You don't need to map anything explicitly. So it will automatically map implicitly. So when it get mapped implicitly, then it will have a gray link. And explicit map, when we will do it, my pipeline input and my service input having a different variable name. So I need to manually map it. So then that case we need to manually map it. That is called explicit mapping, and it will have a black line. When you map it, it will have a solid black line. I'll move on to the next question. How transformers are different. So for example, when you wanted to invoke a service, you can call a service through invoke step, or you can add a map step where in the using transformer you can call your flow services. And when you call your services from transformer, so how it is different from the normal invoke? Because when you add a map step and you are going to use a transformer, you can add n number of map step. You can call n number of services. So if you have one map step where you can invoke n number of flow services using a transformer. So when you do that, the order of execution is not strict. So it will happen in any order in parallel. And also in the transformer, you can do a multiple transformation, because we are going to call multiple service. So we can do a multiple transformation in the same single map flow step. And service out of parameter of the transformer service doesn't get added to the main pipeline. For example, if you have a invoke step and you have called something, and whatever the output, it will available for your pipeline. But this one, even in your map step, you have a transformer where you have invoked 10 different services. So whatever the pipeline variable used, it will not get automatically added. If you want it, and then you need to map it explicitly to a different variable or same variable, then you can use it in your flow. I'll move on to the next question. What is the difference between a loop and repeat? So these two are different flow steps. We have around 7 plus flow steps. So in that, loop is mainly to iterate an array. For example, you have a document list where you have list of information which I wanted to loop it. Then you can use loop, and this loop will automatically exit once it processes all the records. Loop will exit by default after completing all the iteration corresponding to a number of documents in a document list or element in array. For example, I have a document list with 5 records. I am looping that one. So it will execute 5 times and then it will come out automatically. So we don't need to exit anything by default. It will automatically exit it. And then repeat. So basically repeat also, it will look for the particular. So what is repeat is, it is mainly to loop for the specified number of times. For example, I wanted to invoke some set of child steps 5 times or 10 times. Then I can specify the number of times which my repeat has to execute. That I can configure it. And also I can mention the repeat on failure or repeat on success in my particular step, so that repeat will happen only in case of success or failure. I'll move on to the next one. How to handle exception in web method. So mainly in web method, if you wanted to handle the failure, so what we do, so we will add a try catch block. So how do we add it? We will add 3 sequences. There is a main sequence where we'll say exit on success, and in the main sequence we will add, under that we will have 2 child sequences. One will have exit on failure and other one will have exit on done. So the first sequence, which is called main sequence, and the second sequence is your try block, and third sequence is your catch block. So this is how we have to handle our exception in web method. So in earlier cases, in order to achieve this try catch mechanism, we will use a sequence itself. But in the new version, we have a try catch block itself, which you can drag and drop, and you can use it for your exception handling. I'll move on to the next one. What is canonical form? Why do you go for it? So canonical document is a standardized representation that a document might assume while it is passing through web method integration platform. So mainly this canonical document is a common document, common data model, or a generic document structure for a particular message. For example, I have a purchase order message which is coming from the source. So which I wanted to map it to some generic format so that I can publish to my integration layer, through which I wanted to subscribe it and I wanted to send it to a different system in a different format. Then what we can do is, whatever the document is coming in from the different source, I can map it to some generic format, and from there I can subscribe it for my different system. So this is called canonical data model or canonical document. What is the difference between schema and schema DT? So schema DT is nothing but a document type. Schema is a flat file schema, and schema DT is a IS document type created from the schema blueprint. So when you create a flat file schema, if you wanted to create a structure, then there will be an option to click icon which will help to create the schema DT document, which is your document type for the particular schema. And what is flat file schema? It can be used to validate the incoming flat files. This is the place we will specify what is my record delimiter, what is my field delimiter. So those kind of parsing information we will provide in this flat file schema. So using which it can validate your incoming flat file document. And moving on to the next one, what is flat file dictionary? So flat file dictionary contains a record definition, field definition, and composite definition that can be used in multiple flat file schemas. For example, dictionary is a reusable document or reusable component where you can create the list of fields and field definition and composite definition. For example, you have address and you have the same field can carry multiple information like street address and unit address and pin code, all those stuff. Then you can create some composite definition. So those kind of things we can declare and we can define and we can manage it from your flat file dictionary. What is the service? You will use it in a error sequence. For example, we talked about the catch block, right? In the catch block, what is the service we will use it in web methods? Mainly we'll use pub.flow.getLastError, which will get all your exception details. And once we have the exception detail in your error sequence, we can use some kind of automated ticket creation or you wanted to add additional log, or you wanted to send an email to your support team. So those kind of things you can do it in your error sequence. I'll move on to the next one. What is the primary purpose of web service connector? So mainly we will create this web service connector in case of if you wanted to consume any SOAP based web service. So the purpose of web service connector is to invoke a web service in a different server. For example, there is an application where they are exposing their services through SOAP based web service. So I need to consume that service. Then what we will do, we'll get the WSDL, and using the WSDL we will connect to that particular web service. So in web method we will create the connectors for us in order to talk to that particular web service. I'll move on to the next one. How Java services are organized on the web method server. For example, I have a web method integration server, and I can write a flow service, and also I can write a Java service. So when you create a Java service, internally it has to create a Java class. How it gets stored? So when we design or when we write itself, we will write a Java service in a specific folder. So that in that folder you can have a number of services. For assume you have 3 different services in the same folder. Then all these 3 services it will be as a work as a method. Each service will work as a method, and whatever the folder which we have, right, that will create it as a Java program. So that will get compiled and that will create a class for us. So all Java services in the same folder are stored as method in one Java class, which is the name of the folder. So if you have a folder A which has a 3 Java services, then folder A it will get created as a Java program. So it is a a.java, and then all the method will get stored there. So when we compile, then the a.class will get created as part of that particular compilation. We'll move on to the next one. When coding IS services, how can a document type be represented in Java? So it's represented as a iData. So in the variable, so whenever you refer in your Java services, it's referred as iData for a document type. I'll move on to the next one. What is publish subscribe model? So in web method you can create a web services for the real-time implementation or synchronous implementation. So if you wanted to have some asynchronous based requirement where you wanted to handle everything in a asynchronous manner, then what you can use it, you can use this publish subscribe model. So it's a messaging paradigm where sender will send the data to some queue or topic which subscriber can listen and parse or receive and process the data. So in this method, even though you send the data as a publisher, the subscriber no need to know about the publisher. For example, the publisher is publishing a data, so the publisher no need to know how many subscriber I have. So they no need, because it's decoupled, publisher just publish the data. For example, I have a product data which I wanted to publish to so many interested party. So what I'll do is I'll just publish to the topic which different subscriber can consume it from the particular topic. So this way it will get decoupled. I'll move on to the next one. What happens when the pub flows trace pipeline service is invoked? So for example, you have a flow service where you have many flow steps. In between you are calling this service. What will happen? When you call this service, whatever the data available in the pipeline, it will get captured. See here, integration server logs the name value pair in the pipeline at that time. So and also when you invoke this one, it capture it. It also puts that into your server log. So you can go and see, as part of your troubleshooting, you can go and see what other things are available in my pipeline. I'll move on to the next question, which is the last question for today. Output document store and trigger document store. So what are these? So mainly, for example, you have an integration server and which you are from there you wanted to publish some document to some universal messaging or broker. So from the IS, you are publishing a document when universal messaging or broker is not available. So then where the document will go? So it has to store somewhere, right? So that is what this outbound document store. It contains a document waiting to be sent to broker or universal messaging. The integration server places a document in outbound store when configured broker or universal messaging is not available. So for example, my IS is connected to some universal messaging, but that universal messaging is currently down. Okay. So earlier it's configured, but it's currently down for some maintenance. So what will happen? Integration servers, it queued up the document in your outbound document store. So when the universal messaging is up, it will process the document from here so that you will not lose any documents. And what is trigger document store? For example, I am publishing some employee data. For that I have a trigger which is monitoring or which is connected to that particular document type. So I'm subscribing the document type from my trigger. So that particular trigger, for some reason I put it into suspended state. So then where the document will get stored? So it will get stored in your trigger document store. Contains a document waiting to be processed by trigger. For example, I have some resource monitoring enabled for my trigger. So whenever there is a data coming to my trigger is calling a processing service which is getting failed for some reason. In that case, my trigger will go to suspended state and it will keep your messages in your trigger document store. So when the trigger is enabled back, it will process the message from the trigger document store. Thank you. Hi, thank you for watching this video so far. If you like the video, please share it with your friends and also subscribe to this Tech Lightning channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.